Welcome, everybody, to Mentor Time. It's the end of September, so it's great timing to talk about our quarterly update on the changing nature of work. The quarter's big themes that have come up are job hugging and quiet cracking. The latter was new to me until a couple weeks ago. I want to start with the takeaway, as I always do, and remind you if you've heard about the September surge, and I noticed that a lot of resume writers and coaches were posting on LinkedIn about the September surge and everything's going to be great. And it's their job probably in writing posts is more than I make the effort to do. They do it well, they do it often. But they're always talking about the September surge, and it's okay. It's September 29th today. What's different for me, meaning you all that usually attend these sessions or watch in replay? So it goes on through December, and we sometimes see a lot of bumps in December once the stability of cash flow runs through it. Just briefly, a yes or a no. Are you yourself, or do you know of a colleague who is job hugging right now? And that's all I'm going to ask you, a yes or no, a 1 yes, a 0 no. Mary thinks she knows what it means. Yes, maybe. Yeah. Ron doesn't know of anybody or isn't. Stephanie said she does know someone who maybe, or maybe she's feeling it. It's not going to be a big part of what we're talking about, actually, but it's underscoring what we're all doing and seeing and have been for a few years, as you'll see some data. I do start often with letting you know what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing the refrains of the last 4 quarters. So few jobs out there and so many things I'm applying for. This relates directly to job hugging. I feel stuck, but I can't leave because of benefits. So many of you have told me this, and that's a very difficult place to be in if you're in an environment where what you want and what the company is working towards is not matching up anymore, whether it's because of a riff or a merger or a toxic boss. It's very hard from so many people being let go at the same time. But even before January, when we started seeing the huge cuts into many of these service agencies, USAID, CDC, the NIH, science, that accelerated it all because there was no strategic on-ramp process saying, okay, we're expecting a riff 3 months from now. It's going to be this many people now. They'll do layoffs end of December so that they can wipe them off the books for the previous that year. Or they may do layoffs in January to start lean and then build up as they're getting new graduates, new visa holders, whatever. So it's what we saw happen in January, February, March with massive cuts with no warning. 3 days for USAID, CDC, and NIH had some warning, but still lack of clarity. It all came very quickly, all at the same time. And then the other thing that I'm hearing again, I know I've talked a lot in mentor time and in review meetings for the course work that people are doing, that people aren't ready for the idea I keep presenting about the fact that you're building your own career. You're going to have to accept in some fashion part of your career and possibly part of your work from now on forever will be freelance consulting, entrepreneurial. Choose the noun you want, but it will be not an employee relationship where someone else pays the benefits. It'll be you driving a business. And I think many of us are finding some of us, maybe not me, but if I had to do it, I'm not a great business person. Others are doing great jobs running their businesses that they wouldn't necessarily have chosen. So that's what I'm still hearing from you all. And I'm not surprised. It's very hard to think about running your own business. And I considered this a couple decades ago when I left the organization where Mary and I were working. Even before I left, I was considering how I could take my own M&E business, Mary. I can tell you that now because it didn't go very far. All right, so here's how we're going to get there today. We're going to talk about the Q3 effects we've seen so far and the trends we know already. Going forward in 2025, the rest of 2025, job hugging and quiet cracking, and also AI. AI is everywhere, as you all know already. And then we always end with what should you do? And I think there's some interesting things I've read that I'm sharing with you that are much more other people's ideas. I think we can get more control around our own professional presence. And that's basically what we've been working on a lot, especially in the last 2 years, is how do you continue to maximize what you're doing to get virtual visibility. So let's start with the job trends, where we are now. I want to go over the big picture. This is US data. I couldn't find the equivalent for Europe or even a country in Europe, but I admit I just got back late on Friday night and didn't have a lot of time to look around for that level of detail. I didn't do any of heavy duty research while I was traveling. I just read articles that came to my inbox. All right, so BLS is the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US. Little change over the year. Unemployment still 4.3%. Sometimes it's been down to 4.1. We've had a 3.9 at one point. And we have over 7 million people who are unemployed. A couple times ago, I believe it was, I talked about Colleen Paulson had done an analysis of how the way we capture unemployment is artificially lowering what's really happening. So this does not include, at the time, she had shown that the difference between BLS data and what we really know is happening is that there are 10 million people who are unemployed, because once you finish your unemployment eligibility, you roll off the lists of the official US government statistics. And in the way that they give a breakdown, they give us both by age groups and also by ethnicity. We are also seeing little or no change in August. Now, it's interesting among age-wise, adult women have lower unemployment than men, but actually there have already been articles, which I didn't bring up in detail today, about many women leaving the labor force right now because they've lost their job, they're having trouble getting on it, so they're trying to recalibrate what they're doing. And how and whether the new entrepreneurs get counted in labor statistics these days is still unclear to me. You notice a big difference in ethnicity, not surprising. I thought that Hispanics would be higher, but they have filled a huge gap for many decades in our service industries and also our food and nourishment industries, from picking to canning to actually running restaurants and things. So we have a variation in that unemployment, which the spread is huge, and it gets hidden in that 4.3%. This post on LinkedIn I thought was interesting. I didn't go back to the March 2025 data to look at this. I know how he made the table and what data he used. I was trying to find time to verify that we had lost as many jobs in 2024 as he says. But we've all been aware that the market's slowing down, even though in the last 4 months, the Bureau of Labor Statistics have shown our unemployment rate still pretty low. So this person said basically, it's been underway much longer than suggested, and we're still not seeing it. And in fact, there's a question about the September numbers and what will come out. We think already August had some fancy cuts to the way they. Let me just rephrase that. The people who collect the statistics and report on them are not the people who run the agencies. And the person who's running the agency is the one who helps with their main staff decide how and in what way we're going to continue using this definition of unemployment or redefine it. If for example, unemployment in the US was said, they said, okay, officially it'll be 6 months instead of the 12 weeks you have, or whatever things they might change. We know that there are good news headlines being wanted by the present administration. It doesn't matter what we know is being reported to us. What we know is what we're seeing every day. So just be aware that this didn't all of a sudden surface. Yes, we had a lot of workers left without jobs since January of 2025. But we also knew it was a bad labor market a year ago, and that was coming from economic instability, the potential US election changes, and also from companies that were trying to figure out how to do more with less when AI wasn't as far along a year ago as it is now, as well as them not wanting to do what they did in COVID, which was staff up as quickly as they could to get more people in reserve that they then had to lay off. Whew, that was a lot there. All right. Another post about the US job market, and I wanted to show you this in terms of what he said, because it's always interesting to me, like working with an AI agent, you can't trust what everybody says. So he said over 5.2 million people are actively unemployed. I couldn't find the exact number anywhere. What all the search engines and Perplexity helped me identify was some combination of people who say they're intending and still wanting to look for a job versus those that have given up. Fancy numbers, but the one I'm Xing out, if you're hearing 150 million people are quietly searching for something better, and I'm thinking that's a huge number. It turns out that was from two reports, one from Gallup. This was not a report it's not an agency that is not unknown, but it was a 2020 report from Gallup, and I can't remember the other one, that made that they compounded together these claims of how drastic it was. But what we do know from two reports that came out in February 2025 from Flex Jobs, I'm just reading my notes so I get it right, about people wanting to switch careers. 39% they reported in February, and in July, HR Dive found that 58% of workers, these are people who are identified as employed, were wanting to switch jobs. So we know that up to half of the worker population wants to switch jobs, whether they're doing it, whether they're able to do it or not. All right, and then I skipped over job search becomes full-time, blah, 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 because you all know that. I know that. Oops. It surprised me. It's very hard to get the data on this. I went to some of the big experts, including Hung Lee, who's a major force in talent-related folks. Recruiters aren't fully automated, and you'll see a slide on this later. But what we're hearing over and over again is if you're not in the first 200, your chances of being reviewed are really small. And even in the first 200 now, people are saying the first day, the first 50. There's no data specifically on that, but it just says apply early as early as you can. So that's the general job situation. Let's talk about some specific job seeking changes. And I'm going to AI right out of the gate because this just came out about a week or 10 days ago. OpenAI did its own analysis of May 2024 to June 2025. They call it of messages. Messages is what they call it in the chat. Of all the prompts people write. And what they show is in the yellow, 3 categories, each over 20%, one close to 30, two close to 30%. Practical guidance, seeking information, and writing, which equals 78% of everybody using ChatGPT, are the categories where most work is, or most prompts are happening, most work are happening, messaging, they're calling it. They made conclusions, but they didn't give us all the data, but they said they've seen a steady growth in work-related messages, but even faster in non-work-related messages, which have grown from 53% to more than 70%. So these would be messages about, I've got these 3 things in my refrigerator, tell me what I can make with it. What's the best beauty product for my oily skin on my forehead and my dry skin on my lips, or whatever people are asking for it. They also went on to say, work-related usage is more common for educated users in highly paid occupations professionally. And not surprisingly, but doesn't tell me how they account for people that are in the service call center kinds of agencies, whether that AI use is coming through in ChatGPT. What I found interesting and not surprising, because I've heard now for a year that Google has been very worried about its own search delivery, the service it delivers in Google search through Chrome, you will see here that most of what people do in seeking information is seek specific information. And you'll see a table later, but generally, I think all of us have had enough experience with AI where Google's a good start off, especially now that we get an AI summary, but I still never get to the kind of thing that I always wished I could ask Google to look at. Please take these 8 different project manager jobs and tell me exactly how they differ by the industry they're in, because they all say the same title or something. I'm just making that up on the fly. But those specific information is where we're getting the value from AI in terms of getting help to search and all. Probably not a whole lot here that we wouldn't have been able to think about ourselves just based on our own usage of it, as we've seen our usage. I looked at this when it came out. I think Hung Lee had it in his newsletter a couple weeks ago, and I save things every 3 months as when look at things. So we were home early from a day we put on 6 miles walking, and I was like, okay, I'll just look at what's in the email. I looked at this chart and thought, yeah, that's how I'm using it. There's nothing really new here. It's just interesting. These are slides from a presentation. I forgot to go back and look at this guy's name. He works at a company called Radency, I think is how they pronounce it. I didn't go back and watch the presentation, but it was through Hung Lee, who does a lot on talent acquisition topics. And he was talking about how AI is affecting what talent acquisition jobs are doing and what candidates are seeing. So this is similar to we just talked about our traditional Google search. They claim, with no data, he just had slides and no data behind it, 70% of career searches start on Google. And it's probably a good place to start, just if you're looking for a house, you want to go as broad as you can. I'm interested that they say that 86% of millennials use social media for search and discovery, and 72% of Gen Z use generative AI. Because my experience with the people that come to me, especially those people I don't know but come in through the course, is a lot of them are jumping straight to AI, and they are millennial and older. So no sample sizes here, just very interesting. And you can see at the bottom the kind of prompt changes from what we used to just say, I need packable rain boots that are lightweight for my luggage. That's how I would have searched on Google for it, or Amazon. But now I can go straight to Perplexity and get help. All right, same presentation. They talked about job seeker survey results. And again, no denominator. The way I see this was a multiple choice question, because the numbers don't add up to 100, they add up to 350 or something, or the percents, I should say. They're talking about validating that company career site is the place that people go to find out information to learn more about a company. I think this is great if it's really true, because that's what Ron and I advise. Go to the company website to apply, to find out more, et cetera, et cetera. But then I'm finding they're talking about these career sites mattering a lot. And the first 2 things they talk about are the important ones. The others are just more background information. You want to have your website as complete as possible and responsive to people who are looking for information, because AI is going to be scraping it, which we know they scrape everything. And because you now should think of your career site, your website, as not candidate tool for learning, but also training data for AI, meaning when the candidate comes and is looking for things on your website, we want our AI to know, like, how do they find this page and what do they do, instead of doing the old testing we used to do on website user experience, where we would ask them to walk through the pathway of how they got to whatever page we wanted them to find. And this is a schema that they gave us about career, what they're calling career sites. The two red circles are just to show you that most of what they're doing is trying to give you personalized content and to make it natural language so these things are easier, so that they can also then scrape it in a way that makes sense to them about how they're going to build out their product, whether it's Radency who's selling something or whether it's a company that's trying to get you to apply for a job. It's a very busy graphic, but it's interesting. It was mostly just, this is saying, we want your stuff and we want to know how you do it, and we're going to be tracking it, whether you want to or not, as we do with web browsers and as we've done for years with Facebook collecting data on not just how we use Facebook, but how Meta collects everything we do on our browsers. All right, enough complaints on my Facebook. All right. This is from an email that I get from a group called section.ai. They run a lot of good free AI related forward thinking stuff. So the company president, who I just looked up, Noel Shore, I think his name is, wrote a summary after an AI summit they had last week. And I finally found it on the web, so you've got it in a blog post. You'll be able to see it, not just in slides. But he's talking about the great divide coming up in the next 5 years is those who conduct AI. I don't know why he means the word conduct confuses me a little bit, but basically use their AIs, meaning your agentic type of probably AI, to do better work, and those who outsource their thinking to it. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that we still over rely on AI as it's gotten better, overestimating our ability to catch AI mistakes. And also the fact that when we get stronger AI results, we're not doing the work we used to do a year ago when we would read every word ChatGPT gave us back and we'd say, this isn't right. So he came up with a category division he calls AI passengers and AI drivers. So passengers delegate cognitive work to AI, meaning that we've heard this for the 2 years that ChatGPT's been around. Some people I see in job seeker help meetings will say, yeah, I use them to just push all my resume stuff. And they're basically using it as a tool to get something out of it and not necessarily collaboratively. And that he explains that as we get less human oversight of AI, because right now it's getting a lot of scrutiny because it's there, each AI provider, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, you name it, is worried about all the mistakes and where they are and what the biases are. But eventually, people who are using it as a place to get work done and know more will end up being seen as not relevant to a job they're in or a job they could potentially be in because they're not keeping up with AI's output being any different. And he says, gradually you'll lose your ability to produce original thought. I don't know how much, I don't think it goes that far, but anyway. So then drivers are the people who are going to use AI. I'm paraphrasing it. He says they look to AI for a conversation, but what we're really doing is collaborating with AI to use our expertise to get out of it. For example, I just watched something on a big data viz expert went through all the tools. She tried out every tool to try to get it to make a pretty simple chart that she could do with a template that she has in her course stuff in 3 minutes, how long it took each one to do and whether they followed good data viz principles or whatever. But we know from people using AI right now, when you use it as a collaborator, when you use it to give you its critical thinking to force you to think critically, you're probably doing more of what you would do with colleagues when you're doing strategic planning or when you're trying to find holes in your research hypotheses or whatever it is. So at the bottom, it basically his conclusion is AI drivers will claim most of the wealth of the next decade, meaning people who can really make AI add value to the work that we all bring. Passengers have a false sense of security right now because they know enough about it to talk about it in an interview, but they'll be completely replaceable. And he said, all while believing they're on the right side of the AI revolution. I don't agree with that last part of the sentence. I think everybody's still not really sure whether they're actually part of the revolution, contributing to it, or even think it's a revolution. All right. I referred to this graph a few minutes ago. This is a graph of recruiters where the summary of the research was, if we can get, I'm paraphrasing what they said, if we can get recruiters to slow down their decision making, even by some milliseconds, their performance will have better decisions made. They'll be tending to make better hiring recommendations. So in this case, the gray is recruiter would interview yes. If they've taken more time in seconds, they will be able to, do fewer people, but they'll end up spending less. I said that all wrong. Here's the thing the graph says, and that they want you to hear. If recruiters would only slow down a little bit more and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, I don't know what, I got to find a different phrase than that, but, and make sure you're taking into account some of the things that aren't there. Now, remember, I said a lot of recruiters aren't as automated as we think. If they just slow down a little bit, they will make better hiring decisions that might get some of us jobs. So that's a graph I looked at the Substack blog. It still wasn't real strong, but no one puts their data out, I'm discovering these days. All right. So what are we facing going forward? We're definitely facing job hugging and quiet cracking. And I'm just curious if someone wants to unmute and just tell me, how do you think this affects you, if you don't mind? And if you don't want to, that's fine. I'll just wait 30 seconds and see if someone wants to unmute.
The other thing I've noticed is that people who were waiting the last few years to do the last promotion of their career, they're not having that opportunity at all now. All the things you talked about at the beginning. And I'm also finding that when you were talking about females leaving the workforce and then not finding anything else, is that females were also taking the buyouts, which really surprised me. I did not expect that for the current generation that still has a number of years that they can work over.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yes, and in fact, I didn't plant Stephanie doing this, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Job hugging, as you probably all could guess if I'd asked you for a definition, clinging to your job for stability, not leaving something when you've got kids at home, when you've got someone with a chronic illness, when you need to be able to take family or medical leave for caregiving in any fashion. And it does create a bottleneck. And I felt this as I did my last job. Once I turned 60, I was getting veiled hints about, when are you retiring, Sue? When can we bring in someone new? It's definitely, I went from being sliced bread to stale bread, and it happens. I knew it was going to happen, but when it comes, it's hard. But that bottleneck, now this is Adrienne Tom's newsletter, Career Impressions. She's a very well-known resume writer, actually coach. And she said this lack of leadership seats creates openings for fractional, interim, or project-based leadership. So she's basically saying what we've been talking about. You've got to learn to run your own business and figure out what the services you can deliver and then market it for that. Quiet cracking, on the other hand, for me is more worrisome because we already had this in early COVID when people weren't sure if they were going to be laid off. They were put on work from home, but not given the tools they needed to work from home. The systems weren't compatible for dialing in to confidentially fill in your work hours, for example, things that most of us didn't have to deal with when we filled things in at the office. At home, we're having to log on to a VPN and get better bandwidth. Quiet cracking is people that are not, they're not just doing their job just to just to pass the time. They are really struggling because you get to a certain point in your job, you're good at it, and then you want the promotion or you want to think about leaving, or you're not contributing the value because there's no more funding for your project, so you're trying to find work for yourself. So it's this Ernst and Young's chief well-being officer talks about struggling in silence. I think that's true, but I think it's very visible in its silence. The hardest thing is to be able to say it's going to lead to burnout, because if it's going to lead to burnout, we should be able to prevent it. But right now, companies don't. Companies are in the driver's seat and they're worried about the economy. They're worried about their cash flow, and they're worried about suddenly, as many of us were finding in January and February, suddenly someone cuts funding and you don't have your career anymore. So now they're saying, emblematic of bigger trends across the US. Guess what? Those trends have been there. The rockiness. We got through COVID early on. A couple years later, things got stable, and then we started going through the layoffs. Too many during COVID, we'll fire them. Then it's AI, and now we can replace people, but then they've had to retract on that. There are some companies that have been hiring again. And I have to say, as someone who's an older person, we are seeing a lot of layoffs. Make it easy to get rid of the people that are very costly. And senior leaders are, senior staff of any kind are very costly. You've been there a lot of years. I felt it because I had chronic problems with arthritis that I inherited, and I started using up more medical benefits, and I started seeing things discussed in our senior management meetings about basically older employees who are expensive and using up all our benefits. And it was shocking to me that these were the way numbers were being thrown around. Among other people, I was among the older, but there were still other people that were old then. All right. So that's quiet cracking. And that's harder because that's on an employee. That's not from senior leaders and executives. That's any employee in the job. And people that are in lower level jobs have less opportunities just generally anyway. I want to go through an article because I thought this was something that can give us some introspection, ability to reflect on AI. A couple years ago, I talked about the fact that there was a big push to go to skills-based hiring. And I brought up my viewpoint, which is, you may remember, skills are not experience. Skills is learning something. And just because you have a skill doesn't mean you've done it and should be hired for it. And I still feel that way. And we'll talk about it again. I've got it on my list of topics for early, probably December, I hope. So they say, what's the point of skills-based hiring if AI is accelerating the redundancy? And I thought these two were interesting examples. So this person took what he called a CV booster approach. In 2024, you could say you hand-tuned SQL mastery. This is very much a coding and technology topic. And he's saying, now Copilot can do all of this work and debug itself in almost no time. We don't need you anymore. And tech people are feeling that, have been feeling that for over a year and a half. The second one is pixel perfect UI prototyping. Basically, it's making a beautiful image of some user experience that they want to use for a training manual, for example. Figma's been able to do some of this, but we know now many of the AI imaging tools can help us make something much more complex. And in this case, he says, interactive layouts from a prompt complete with responsive components. So skills being swallowed by software features, I guess. I'm not going to go that far, but I will say this is similar to the "Are we losing our minds with AI" writer. The people who are going to bring the value is now not how just what you know and can do, but how you can use it to get to the next thing that no one knew yesterday. So it's the individual value we all bring in AI is our perspectives and experience are different. And we all can take the same problem, and our synapses and whatever else goes on in our brain can come up with very different approaches, all of which may work. I want to end just showing you a chart that HubSpot did an analysis of what it took them to get to what they call AI fluency in their organization. They finally got there from October of 2023 to July of 2025 when they announced it's become a role expectation. They didn't say that it's written into every job description. They say they're adding it into job descriptions and hiring expectations. No more information than that. But we've talked for 2 quarters about the need to acknowledge how you use AI as a tool in your work so that you can get attention. So let's go on. I know I'm running long for what you should do. The same article on skills-based hiring, he had this great table, and he calls it meta skills compounding every, I don't know why he said fresh tool, but so instead of saying, I took this course and I got a certificate, aren't I great? Now you want to talk more about learning agility. I would say you want to talk about learning agility in terms of what I always tell people when they take a course and they say, Sue, I got this certificate. Don't just tell me you got the certificate. What are you going to do with it? How have you already used dummy data or some volunteer project to use it? Show me where you've moved from learning the knowledge, getting the skill, that gets you so far. When have you applied it in a way that we can begin to see what it would look like in actual work? So I highlighted this in yellow because that's one tool I think you might want to think about. Look at it, see what you can apply to your own situation to take it forward. For those job searching, this is what he says potentially we could be doing for candidate assessment. The first one I thought was very interesting. Scenario-based dropped into an AI live environment where they've never seen this and being given something to navigate to value. Again, the value is whatever the judgment of value is there. Adaptive psychometrics, I don't know a lot about. Career path heat maps, though, for me, this looks like heat maps would be what roles are up and coming, what do we need to be planning for, and what roles are dropping out. I assume that's what he meant by a heat map. And the most important one for all of you, and I've got to try to write some more on how to incorporate this into what you all are doing, is reframing your skills for AI first. So what I want you to think about doing is mapping a skills matrix and structure. Where do you fit AI into that? Then taking it into your experience and talking about, if I had done it 10 years ago in this job, I could have saved this much time, or I would have been able to produce training manuals in 3 different languages instead of just in one, whatever it is, so that you can begin to, again, just some ideas for you to take forward. Adrian Tom talks about the fact that you need to basically have your own communications campaign. And I hadn't thought about it this way, but it's not just following up on a job application and not just following up on an interview with thank you very much, even if it's a rejection. But the one that I highlighted with the red arrow is the thing that you can do over and over again that I talk about. Use your visibility on LinkedIn. A post, an article has a little bit more challenge to it, but writing posts that reinforce your leadership expertise, even substantive comments. I will make comments on things that Brenda Meller or Ken Lang or Linda Brubaker, all people who talk about and are experts on LinkedIn and using LinkedIn for visibility, are thought leaders. I will make a substantive comment on what they write, agreeing or giving a different example or whatever, so that you get known and noticed. So your professional presence is associated with that. And finally, she talks about leveraging the job hugging environment. I have a caveat on this. She says, update your resume and LinkedIn headline to include interim or project-based availability. I find it awkward to include it on your resume because people want to know what you can do for them, not how you want to do your work. It feels very me. Your LinkedIn headline, for sure. I'm seeing more creative stuff on that. put it in your about section. And I loved her sample script on that you can communicate in networking events, language about how you can do that. Almost done. OpenAI, about 3 days ago, published this one pager with 4 different areas. The reason I wanted to give it to you is they are saying, here's how you can stand out for OpenAI recruiters. So each of these 4 areas may give you some inspiration and thought, even if you're not trying to work for OpenAI. I thought it was useful. And finally, Kevin Turner, who's known as the president of LinkedIn because he keeps track of every single change of how to do things. He's an excellent brander. He's not saying anything we haven't talked about before, but make sure that you're putting yourself together in a professional presence package that makes sense for you, that you know where your opportunities are to provide visibility and value, while you're also trying to position yourself in the market. We started with the September surge. It's not over, and it's not over for all of you because I gave you a lot of ideas of things you can do. Let me stop there. Ron, comments?
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief because we're close to the end. Yeah, it's interesting, especially the AI component to all of this is a very interesting thing. And I think you picked up some really interesting ideas around how you can be. I think that driver passenger model is really helpful because I don't know what the rest of them are thinking, saying, which one am I? I was doing that in my own head and trying to see examples that I've done, which I was more a passenger, and other examples where I was more of a driver. And I think that's actually the key to perhaps expressing yourself in when you're looking at, okay, I'm revising my CV or resume or whatever, and you're doing that. And okay, so here's how I was able to accomplish this particular task using this particular tool. And I was a driver or whatever. And so there's language that you can write around that. So to illustrate, in fact, how your competency with AI made the job go better. I guess that's the bottom line. And yeah, and it's more than a tool. And I think we have to remember that. I tend to sort of slough it off and say, okay, remember when slide rules were replaced by calculators. But this is substantially different. And this business of losing your brain along the way because you stop thinking, I think there's a serious danger for it. But this idea of being a driver and seeing the kind of characteristics of it being a driver, I think that's as a driver, you can see how a proper conversation with an AI tool will result in better work. And you did it with your colleague. So that's how I treat my AI assistant as an executive assistant, and right. I give tasks to that he she that he she or whatever the they. And it's for me, it's been a very interesting thing. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. I will ask if there's any burning questions from anybody who's here. You can just unmute.
So I'm not sure if it's easy to predict this or not, but with what you're seeing in your research, is there a hypothesis on how long it will take for all of this to level out? Thinking also about all the graduate students coming out of graduate schools, and for it to level out to where people are not going to have a problem finding jobs. I actually saw in an informal post on LinkedIn among USAID workers that only half of those that had responded had actually found a position.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. In terms of a hypothesis of how long it's going to take, I just want to remind you, we are probably back to where Ron and I were at. I'm putting you in this group in the early 90s when we were using small PCs, and when WordPerfect was out, we had Lotus 1, 2, 3, the early days of technology. We had Pine mailers in the Unix system for writing emails in 92, 93 when I was overseas working for Japigo and traveling to Turkey. Email was not answered. So I'm just trying to give you an equivalent because it probably took at least 10 years. And the way that we're facing now is We are in a situation where there's much more downside to AI being used incorrectly or too quickly or not carefully enough. We're already seeing some of that with people that are getting addicted to an AI chatbot as a girlfriend, whatever, make up a story you want to say happened. What we see in terms of jobs and filling jobs, I think it's intentional in many ways in the administration we have to not make a whole lot of jobs available, which means we are continuing to enrich people that are already rich. And I think that there is going to be an economic reckoning. I am not an economist. I'm just telling you that I've watched my portfolio value not change very much and actually do better sometimes. And when I retired over 10 years ago now, I thought I might be frantic by this time because I didn't know where the stock market would go. So I don't have a definitive answer. I have a guess to it, which is that I'm hoping that our government will step up along with other governments to make more constraints on AI use, but they're not doing it right now. And these agencies, from Tim Cook bringing a gold brick or whatever he brought to the people, the Meta and all of the big CEOs paid over $1 million a piece to go to the inauguration, but that was not by choice. That's a business expense for them. I think about it, Mary and Stephanie, the way we work overseas. There are those veiled hints about it'd be really nice if you'd give me a vehicle while you're giving the satellite clinic a new van. I'm not saying it was useful to do or not useful to do, but it was the cost of doing business. And the cost of doing business for those of us in knowledge work, and especially in more service-oriented jobs, is not the same. I think we keep seeing a shaking out. We have people trying to hold the reins and trying to hold these companies accountable. There are lawsuits right now at OpenAI because they have documented people who've died by suicide, documented people whose mental health has gotten worse from protections that Sam Altman says that shouldn't happen. We programmed it, but it didn't. It did, and it turned out he hadn't. Who knows what they did? But I'm just saying we're trying to look at the way to take it forward. In terms of our jobs, the job market, I will continue to say, will be most likely for all of you owning your own business, doing work. And I've said this repeatedly for over a year now, maybe longer. I know it's scary. I run a business now. I just don't have quite as much the finances as others do. But we've got to look at pushing ourselves along, irrespective of AI. This was coming and already was happening. What happened in COVID is we saw a lot of people who either were riffed or took the opportunity to say, hey, I like working from home, and my clients want to work with me whether I have my own company or I work at company ABC. So my bet is that we will continue to see fewer employees at organizations, and companies will be making money off of AI. And what the rest of us will do, I don't know. It does remind me that there is some value to providing a certain amount of US government wage to every person across America. We've known this from USAID did several studies in different countries on cash transfer and helping families stabilize at a certain level of lower middle class health and wealth by having cash delivered to them where they could make the decisions about their expenses. So I think that AI is a problem. I think that jobs are a problem, but I also see a lot of us need to go through a mindset shift. It's easy for me because I'm doing it already, and I also have benefits cover. I have benefits because I'm on Medicare. I'm that old. I have benefits from the US government that I paid into, so I'm happily using them. So I don't have a good answer for you, Stephanie, but I also don't want people to obsess about the jobs, because what it means is that we're being forced to think about something that could have been happening anyway. The older you get, the more likely you're going to be part of some layoff discussions. And I went through it several times at my last company when I got moved around, shifted, demoted in terms of a VP title, things like that. We just have to get used to not a straight career path where you climb up a ladder. Oh, I went on and on. I
Can I
apologize.
just throw in something
I
there,
wish you
Sue?
would, Ron. Bring us back.
Okay, look north. The
Oh,
reason I say
okay.
that is that the policies of the government of Canada and the things that try to do relative to some of the stuff we end up talking about is very different. Our unemployment rate is much lower, and but we're into issues. But where the issues are for Canada are mostly in manufacturing. So knowledge workers are in demand, and so that's what I'm saying is have a look. There are things, I'm not saying they're there, but the environment favors things like, in fact, the Prime Minister recently said Canada is going to become an AI powerhouse, for example.
Oh,
So
good.
things like that are there, and looking for partnering with other countries. The United States is not our favorite partner right now for various reasons that you may have seen in the news.
Yeah.
And but the point is that our the way Canada operates has some familiarity for people who worked in the United States, and it's an option anyway. Just to think about. I know places are hiring. So,
Thank you for that reminder.
yeah.
All right. I am going to close the meeting because we're over an hour. I appreciate everybody's attention and the fact that I get to do this with you all. So, Ron, I'll ask you to close the meeting. I believe we are meeting in 2 weeks, which will be a holiday. I'm pretty sure I put it on the holiday because I'm away the week after that.
All right. Thank you very much, yeah, because it's going to be a holiday for us. It's our Thanksgiving around that time.
All
So
right.
anyway, thanks very much for joining us today. And it'll be interesting how folks who sign into this as a recording will enjoy this topic. It's been very interesting. So thanks, Sue, again for the work you do. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.